Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Madison.
And today we are going to be talking about how not to be ruled by your emotions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
All right, so what was your favorite song from whenever you were a teenager that you can still rock out to today? Well, one of those that's kind of, you really don't want to listen to when anybody else is around, but you still like jam to.
Anything by Paramore.
Okay.
Or One Direction. That one's a little bit more embarrassing, but that's okay. Specifically, I'll go with, there's a song that Paramore has that has recently, within the past couple years, made a resurgence because of TikTok as a sound, and it's the one, I don't know if you'll recognize it or not, but it's the one where Hayley Williams goes, "All I wanted was you," and she's in the stratosphere. It's so high that I can't really sing it in a falsetto, but I give it my best.
There you go.
It's a good song. She's so talented.
I'm not familiar with that one. I have a couple. One, Ice Ice Baby. I remember when that came out. Loved that song. Another one, Criss Cross's Jump.
Oh, yeah.
They were the two kid rappers. They wore their clothes backwards.
I did not know they
Criss
wore their
Cross
clothes
make
backwards.
You jump, jump.
I know
Daddy
the song.
Mac will make you jump, jump. Yeah.
I just didn't
one.
know they wore their clothes backwards.
Yep, that was their gimmick. They wore pants, shirt.
I kind of love
all
that.
of it backwards.
Bold choice.
I mean, it got them noticed.
Yeah.
And in all of their videos, they had it all backwards. But it's not practical. But it was cool, and I jammed out to that whenever I was a kid.
So
Thought it was awesome.
You went more for the hip hop sound when you were younger.
Yes.
Did you then transition into the 80s music when you got 80s rock music? I've heard you talk about that a lot.
All of those things were happening at the same time.
I wasn't sorry.
Yeah, no.
Misplaced time frame.
Yeah, no, whenever I was a kid, Paula Abdul was doing her thing, Opposites Attract, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction and Lies, Def Leppard's Hysteria, Motley Crue stuff was going on.
You got to grow up with good stuff.
Yes, The Cars, Pat Benatar, Joan Jett,
wow.
All of those things were going on. And then,
that.
As the 80s were kind of heading out, 89, 90, you started getting into some of the Vanilla Ice, Criss Cross. All of that started happening late 80s, early 90s. And then I think, when did Nevermind by Nirvana came out in 92 or 93, maybe? So all of that was happening.
It's a lot going on.
It was a very awesome time in music.
What's the song that everybody confuses with Ice Ice Baby, the beginning of it? It sounds like
Under
another
Pressure
song? Okay.
by David Bowie
and
Queen. Yes.
Yeah, every time I hear the beginning of one, I'll confuse it for
Well,
the other.
I think he got sued pretty big time. I remember an interview where he was trying to say it wasn't the same thing, dun 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 dun.
So he copied them.
He sampled them and didn't credit them. Yes.
Oh, rude.
Yeah, no, it was.
Still a bop though.
So like I said at the top, we're going to be talking about our emotions. So, do you find it easy or difficult to control your emotions?
There's some qualifiers that influence my answer. So I'll maybe, instead of saying whether it's easy or difficult for me, I'll give the two most important things for it to be easier for me to be in control of my emotions, and that is sleeping enough and eating enough. If I'm tired or I'm hungry, it is so much harder for me to control my emotions. Otherwise, I would say maybe down the line, there's good days and bad days. How about you?
I'd say yes or no. Yes and no. With you, if I'm hungry, I'm a absolute crab.
Yup.
I don't do well.
The yup wasn't agreeing with you.
Yeah.
It's me as well.
Yeah, no,
it's Michael's terrible.
And I've gotten better at it. I would have said hard no back in the day. Like, if I felt what I felt and everybody was going to know it, like, I still kind of radiate my vibe. Like, if I'm not in a great mood, like, I don't have a poker face. If I'm feeling some sort of way, even if I'm not, like, verbally expressing it, like, I radiate whatever it is. But I have gotten better at it. Like, and at least recognizing it whenever it happens, or whenever I'm starting to feel some sort of way, and acknowledging it and owning it.
Do you think getting better at not, like, radiating every emotion in the moment, do you feel like that's just happened with growth as you've gone, or have you been, like, super intentional to be conscious of your body language?
I've had to be both. Like, okay. I've had to be intentional about it, like, and not expecting everybody else to own my feelings. I think that was, like, a pretty big shift. Like, okay, I'm feeling this way, but I don't need to act on it. Like, I can still reflect Jesus and what I'm supposed to do in spite of my feelings. Like, they don't have to own me, and nobody else is responsible for owning my emotions.
Yes, that's a huge thing. Like, I that was the biggest learning curve that I got with my first relationship, was I 100% did the thing where it was like, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "I'm fine." I'm fine. And so I feel like acknowledging that, like, it's not the other person's job to pull it out of me has helped me actually communicate when I am feeling something. So I've gotten, there's some growth there for me too. And
we can touch on it a little bit later, but, like, learning how to verbalize my feelings.
Yeah,
like,
that's hard.
In prayer. That was one of the things that helped me learn to control them, to better control them. Like, I still... Like, well, I mean, we can go right in here. When was a time you let your emotions get the best of you?
There's a lot of options to pick from.
Whenever I saw Sarah put that on the doc, I was like, yikes. Like, which one do I feel safe sharing?
I feel pretty confident sharing, like, so in my when I was a teenager, my first job was at Chick-fil-A, which was a great place to work for the first time, but it was also stressful because, you know, you get scheduled during crazy busy shifts. And I would say, like, this was probably, like, the defining moment for me of I let my emotions get the best of me in a way that was very embarrassingly public. And it taught me a lesson that I didn't necessarily want to put myself or the people around me in that position. I wanted to learn how to recognize when it was happening, and then figure out, okay, either we need to put this in a box and say we'll come back to the box when we have the ability to, because people are counting on me right now, or we'll just go, you know, take a quick little break and deal with it. So it was just a stressful day, super, super stressful day. I was on, like, the register that you, like, when you take orders in the restaurant. And I didn't realize that I was supposed to be making my own milkshakes that day. So because sometimes there was somebody who would just make milkshakes, but I had to make them. And
you get that many orders for milkshakes that's, like, they have a dedicated milkshake person?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Well, when I worked there, but that was a while ago. That was, like, 10 years ago. So I got, like, way behind, and a manager fussed at me, and I got so embarrassed because I didn't ever get fussed at much as a kid. And so I just started sobbing. And then it was like... and it was very embarrassing, because then it becomes all about you in the exact moment when you don't want eyes on you.
Yes.
Yeah, that was probably my first public meltdown.
Well, I'll share one of mine.
Yeah.
Then. So, like, I remember I was in 9th grade, maybe. No, 10th grade. 10th grade. And I, you know, like I mentioned before, like, home life wasn't all that great during that time. And I had an English assignment that, I mean, I was bombing out of this English class that I was in. And the teacher, like, wanted me to, like, bring my assignment up and turn it in, and, like, I didn't have it, and I just threw, like, a massive hissy fit and was like, I don't care about this class, and I just got up and stomped out. Which, you know, so, like, that was a time when, like, shame and embarrassment.
Oh, yeah.
happened. And fun fact on that, so like the summer of squashing beefs that I've mentioned before. So whenever
Trademark.
yes. So whenever that should be.
It should be.
Lost my train of thought. Oh, so I went home whenever I was back home in Missouri. I had my girls at an ice cream shop there.
Yeah.
And I saw that teacher and apologized for being rude in her class and asked forgiveness for that. So that was like a cool little
remember?
thing. She did.
I bet that meant so much
So
to
like
her.
that was a very cool moment. So if you do have a public meltdown, it's not too late to make amends.
I'm waiting for some of my students in my student small group to come circling back in a few years to me.
But another one that I have is, so this one lawn mowing season here usually lasts from like March to November.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like almost. And I had this broken down like lawnmower, and every time I would go out to mow it, like the axles were bent on it.
Ooh.
And so like it looked like a duck feet. Like the tires were like pointed out like so. And it was like the tire was only held on by this little E-clip.
Oh.
And so like I would go like maybe 50, 60 feet, and then the tire would roll off, and then I'd have to jack the mower back up. And like I did that for an entire mowing season.
Why?
And because I didn't have any other way to cut my grass at the time. And so it is just what it is.
I would have just not cut it.
You can't not cut your grass.
Do you have an HOA?
I did at the time.
Oh, okay, then yeah,
So-
understandable.
So but that was just a nightmare. And I remember like after like the 5th or 6th time that happened, like the first day that it started doing it, like I lost it out. Like nobody was around to like see it or witness it, but I threw a massive hissy fit. I cursed the mower, like all of the things. I did everything short of Job's like cursing my own birthday, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but that was another one. Like I distinctly remember my emotions getting the better of me on that. And then I just shifted gears and was like, God's going to teach me patience through this.
Yes, patience. I just saw a meme the other day that made me think of this. I'll see if I can find it, but if not, don't worry, I'll explain it, guys. It was like the caption was, when you're already having a bad day and then your belt loop catches the door handle and then it was some like extreme, like you break down or whatever. And I was like, that, honestly, I would have never thought of that, but that gets me. It's the small little things when you're already at your limit. It's just like, here's a little inconvenience, and I just lose it. There's
always a straw.
Yeah, there is.
And so that's a great segue into where we're going to go here. Yeah. So before we shift gears into what we can learn from Jesus on controlling our emotions, check out this clip from our senior pastor, Brian Hughes.
In our day, there's one word for anger. We use anger and mad sort of interchangeably, and it means the same thing. But in Jesus' day, there are two words for anger, and they mean very different things. One of them, is the word thumos. And thumos is like a fire in dry grass. It flames up quickly, and it dies just as quickly. This kind of anger is reactive. When my kids were little, speaking in an ugly or disrespectful way to their mother would light a flame in me quickly. I was firm and fast, never abusive, but I was usually the parent who was slack. I was the parent who just really was pretty lenient in most every area, and that's a conversation for another day. But if my kids wanted to make me mad, the fastest pathway there was to treat their mom with disrespect. And they knew it, which is why it almost never happened. Almost. That anger inside of me was not rage. I was pretty mad though, and it was thumos. It was reactive and uncontrollable. Not my actions. Hear me say this clearly. I'm not saying that my actions were uncontrollable, but the feeling that was invoked inside of me was like when you touch a hot stove. Anger was there before I even thought about it being there. The same is true for me when I feel like somebody has taken advantage of me. That's thumos. Or if my kid or my grandkid gets mistreated, or someone I love, that's thumos. And if I'm honest, occasionally, during certain driving situations, I have a bit of thumos. The family I grew up in majored in thumos. We'd get mad. There would be yelling, maybe some cussing. And then, hey, could you pass the mashed potatoes? What are we doing today? It was like that. When we first got married, Susan was like, what is happening? I don't understand what you people are doing. Anger would flare, then it would subside, and then it was over, mostly. Thumos is the anger that reacts quickly to something that touches us personally and emotionally, and then it flames out just as quickly. And thankfully, this is not the word that Jesus uses. If he'd used this word, we'd all be in real trouble because thumos can't be controlled. Even though our actions can be controlled, the feeling that it invokes cannot be. Jesus uses the other word for anger here, and that anger is orge. And orge is anger that has become deep-rooted. This is long-lived anger. It's the kind of anger that you feed, and the wrath grows, and you keep it close so it grows hotter, and you share it with others to build a coalition of allies. Now you got an army of angry people. Orge is the anger over which people stew, and they churn it, and they won't let it die.
So Pastor Brian there, he leans into the anger because that's the emotion anger. And that's what that entire message is about. And it is a fantastic message. And we have the link there to it. And I want to encourage everybody to go and look at that. Yeah. And I think one of the things that he pointed out there was that, I mean, the thumos, like, you're going to feel it, but you don't have to act on it. And so I want to just look at an example here of where Jesus did feel anger, because that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at Jesus expressing a whole host of emotions that we all have, but isn't controlled by them.
The best person to learn from.
That is true. And so here in Mark 3, starting right at the top with verse 1 through 6, another time Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, which was unlawful for them, like no work on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger. That would just be the most terrifying thing, I would imagine.
I wish I could be a fly on the wall.
And so he looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus.
Wow.
So, I mean, here, he experienced thumos, like the anger built up in him. And, you know, Jesus got angry, yet he did not sin. We read that in Hebrews 4:15. And likewise, we as followers of Jesus are taught in Ephesians 4:26, be angry and do not sin. Like, the emotion that we feel, like the thumos, if we just let it come up, like we feel it, we experience it, but we don't let our actions be dictated by it.
Yeah.
Or dwell on it and keep it in us and become orge, like he mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to be a slave to it. And Jesus demonstrated that here, like how to feel anger, but still do what you're called to do, and to still move forward in a way that's honoring of your God.
It makes me think of, and this is not from a perspective that I truly understand, and hopefully I will one day, but disciplining your children of there's I'm sure that I ticked my mom off all the time. Like, I'm sure she got angry, but like she had to make the choice to, like, my sister and I were never disciplined in the moment. It was, okay, you go to your space and have some quiet time, and you think and process, and I'm going to do the same thing. She never acted out of anger. She gave herself as much time as she needed to calm down, so that in her disciplining, she wasn't acting out of anger. And I guess that's, that just made me think of that.
Yeah, I mean, and Jesus was angry, but he still healed the person. He still made his point known.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus looked at them in anger.
Yeah. But he didn't. He was very careful with his replies too.
Yes.
Which I think is my area to grow. Okay, next emotion up, exhaustion. I'm gonna rename this one in my brain to like when I get overly sleepy or overly hungry. That's like the two qualifiers I said.
Yes.
Like this would be the category for me. So there's a lot of examples in the New Testament of Jesus teaching and then stepping away and
Needing some
having
me time.
either time with just his disciples or time by himself. But there's always some descriptors of the fact that the time with himself was for rest, but then also for reconnection with God. Because I don't know about you, but like I've had weeks. The number one thing I can think of is the week after Christmas. We are all
burned out.
We're so tired, and we're very blessed. We all get the week after Christmas off, which is just like a lifesaver. But if I just sleep that week, like I don't come back to the new year feeling good. Like it's not just sleep that you need. It's like it's a rest. So, anyways. This scripture in particular, I just picked one, but there's a lot more examples. It's coming from John 4, verses 5 through 6. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the property that Jacob had given his son Joseph. That's just saying this plot of land here comes from way, way, way back in the Old Testament. They can trace who originally owned it. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, worn out from his journey, sat down at the well. It was about noon. So this is right before the woman at the well approaches to draw water. So I just wonder, like, if he hadn't have taken some time out to sit down at the well and rest before she came to draw water, like, would he have been as... I mean, he's Jesus, so he's perfect. But like theoretically, would he have been as readily like? What am I trying to say? Would he have been as like capable of communicating to her in a way that captivated her attention if he hadn't taken time to rest?
Yeah,
Would he have been truly present with her?
Yeah, and I think just to show that you don't have to be controlled by it. Like, yeah, was he exhausted and tired, and he wanted to sit down and take a break?
Yeah.
Sure, like he was fully human, like, and he felt that way. But whenever somebody came up and approached him and wanted to talk, did he set how he was feeling aside to do what he was called to do, and to make himself present? Say, "Here I am. Like, this is what I'm called to do."
Yeah.
Like, I love that example right there because it shows. I mean, I get tired and grumpy.
Yeah.
But you don't have to act on it.
Yeah. I feel like there's probably about once every few months where there's just one thing that popped up that I did not want to pop up. Like, somebody needs something from me when I'm already at my wit's end of, like, I am just about to check out for the day and somebody needs some information and it's urgent, or my friend needs some emotional support. Things that I ideally, like, want to be able to do. But whenever granted, boundaries are important, but when it's urgent, whenever I push myself to meet the urgency, I always feel like I was equipped. I was equipped to do what I needed to do. I made it through. Okay, now I can unplug. And I feel like the rest is almost better once I'm like, okay, God, is it time now? Anyways,
I think that's where you have a plan. You know what? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to take a break. I'm going to carve out this time for me, but allowing yourself, but like having it in the back of your mind. But if God chooses to interrupt here, like he has full priority over your time. Yeah,
the calendar is his. We just try our best to time block it well. Doesn't always work.
No. And here's another emotion that Jesus expressed, joy at pleasing his Father. And I think what's interesting here, I want to read this first, and then I got something to kind of give it a little bit more context.
Cool.
John 15, 9 through 11. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. It gets to be a tongue twister. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Now, he says this, now in just a few short chapters, like we're going to move from that moment to the crucifixion.
Wow.
And that's part of what makes this particular passage such a powerful teaching on the subject of joy. And really in the surrounding context, like I wrote here, like joy isn't even the main idea. By this point right here, like before Jesus said this, he's already told the disciples that one of them was going to betray him. He's already foretold of Peter's denial. The disciples had already been told of his impending death. Like he had already, all of these things were already exposed and out on the table. But he still said, like, regardless of your circumstances, like you can have joy. And that's not to like be in denial about like the things that you're facing.
Yeah.
But if you keep his commands and you love him, you will find joy in the midst of your suffering.
Yeah.
And so like you don't have to let your, like we've mentioned before, like our senior pastor Brian has a saying, you know, like you either let your faith inform your circumstances or your circumstances inform your faith. If you don't have to let those feelings of just depression and sorrow and all of those things control you. You can find joy in it, and it comes from your relationship with God and being in accordance with his commands.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like it. All right. Emotion number 4, disgust.
And I think like that one is probably one of the more prevalent ones online. Like everybody acts in disgust and outrage and anger and rage. The orge is deep, and disgust is usually right there with it.
Yep, and they do sometimes really park it there in that emotion. And I have been, no judgment. I've been there before. I'm very grateful that I'm not anymore, because I'll tell you what, it feels nasty. It feels like it's consuming your body when you live in that state.
Well, I mean, when you think of like somebody that's just like completely bitter, like their entire physicality changes.
Yeah.
Like everybody can imagine like the most bitter person that they've ever known. Like they never look pleasant. They never look healthy.
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those things.
Their
face, yes.
That's probably not a good example. It just looks like I ate like
That's
a sour candy.
That's the screen cap for this episode.
All right. So this one in particular, just to clarify, it's disgust, but it's kind of specifically pointed towards greed, racism, oppression of the poor, all of the things that we know Jesus came because these things were important to him, not greed and racism, the opposite of it. Wait. Okay, so we're pulling from...
The stamping out of.
Yes, thank you. We're pulling from John chapter 2, starting in verse 13, and we're going to go through verse 17. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords. That's my Jesus. Hold on. Can we picture this for a second? How long do you think that took him? Like, do you think he just, like, grabbed it and then, he just grabbed something and then it was like, whoosh? Or do you think he, like, braided them together? So
I think he fashioned it himself, like, on the spot.
Yeah. I love it. we should do that more often as a society. No. So he made a whip out of cords. He drove them all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of money changers and overturned their tables. So I'm just imagining everyone is just standing around shell-shocked because he is tearing it up. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So I think that's a pretty great example of Jesus being disgusted.
Yes.
This is, honestly, maybe you can chime in on this. This one was one of the more difficult ones for me to kind of think through. Every time that I think about Jesus acting in this particular circumstance out of wanting to purify the temple and make sure that worship was happening in a way that was actually worship, I always think, okay, how do I apply that to me? Because I don't know why. It's one of those situations where I'm like, not every circumstance calls for physically flipping tables and cracking around whips and fussing. So, like, have you ever had situations that you've had to pick and choose? I'm experiencing this emotion. I need to address something, but then I'm not trying to insinuate that Jesus' disgust, like, his emotion controlled his action. I don't think that happened. I think he made the call that was right. How do you apply guidelines to, I need to make something happen here because somebody I care about is hurting?
I mean, whenever I have felt like disgusted at somebody's behavior, I mean, I confront them one-on-one. Like, I mean, that's how he also talks in other places about, going to that person one-on-one, and making your thoughts known to that person, and if they don't change, then you bring back two battle buddies and you confront them with the group, and then at that point that they still don't listen, then you bring it to the church. I've never had the opportunity to or I don't want to say opportunity like it's something I'm excited to do, but like I've never had the circumstances present themselves where it's ever gone beyond where I come back with like a couple members of my small group and we confront somebody about like a particular behavioral issue that we've noticed.
So it's always been, the one-on-one has always kind of been the ticket for you.
I've only only done it once where I've gone a couple people from my small group and we've confronted somebody.
Okay.
But I've never had a situation present itself where I've thought that I was called to do something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure there are specific situations with specific people that they are meant to. I'm sure that there are some people that are meant to kind of emphasize, we should be treating people better than this, or we should be reverencing God more. Whatever the situation is, we should XYZ. This is not how it's supposed to be, and like, bring in the shell shock value so that everybody else can be like, oh, yeah. Like, that's a lot of my conviction has come from, like, situations where people, are, teaching messages or whatever, and they bring up this point in a way that is filled with emotion, and it stirs emotion in me. So I know it's important. It's just, that one feels like a hard one for me to gauge, and that tells me I need to loop in some wiser people until I feel like I get the hang of it.
I've never felt convicted to do anything like that. So he made a whip of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, get these out of here. Like, I've never felt convicted to do that.
Yeah, I don't think that I would be I don't think God's going to call on me to flip some tables, because I think I would immediately go too far with it.
But there is a meme that I've seen online where it says, when someone asks what would Jesus do, and then it says under, like, on the bottom part of it, keep it. When someone asks what would Jesus do, keep in mind that making a whip of cords and driving and flipping tables is always on the table, or something like that.
Yeah, I love it.
So the next one, sorrow. Jesus has expressed sorrow when Jesus' close friend Lazarus died, and his sister Mary said those words are wrought with disappointment. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That was in John 11:32. Jesus evidently felt sorrow, and certainly Jesus knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and that's why he let him die and remain in the tomb for 4 days, and you can read about that in John 11. Yet we read that when Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and Jesus wept. He felt bad for them. He empathized with them. He sympathized with them. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And in Luke 19:41 through 44, the Lord is taking his last trip to Jerusalem shortly before he was crucified, and at the insistence of his own people, the people he came to save. Earlier, the Lord had said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who send her, how often I wanted to gather your children together, just as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not have it." Like, Jesus felt sorrow both for the siblings of his friend who had passed, but he also felt sorrow for just the fallen state of people, like in general, in the way that they behaved, in the way that we had been corrupted because of the fall and because sin and death had entered the world. Like whenever I read that, like I read sorrow into it. So I mean, he expressed both, but just like I'd mentioned earlier, in those he never let. I mean, it's easy to just go from being sorrowful into depression. Yeah. Like we see people that have experienced that a lot. I mean, I myself have battled with depression in the past. Like it's easy to just go into that space and stay there. Yeah. But Jesus, as a fully human person, like saw those things, felt sorrow for both of those reasons. Like with the state of his friends, whenever they were mourning their friend or their brother that died, whenever he looked out at the people that he had come to save, who were going to call for his crucifixion, and he knew that going in, like he felt sorrow for them, and I think that just speaks to the way that he loves us and cares for us. That whenever he looks at us, like, and sees the way that we are and knows that we're called to be more than that. Yeah. It really just, it makes me, I don't know, like, know that he sees me like that, but he loves me all the same. Yeah. Like it makes me feel some sort of way. Yeah, I can definitely see that. This sorrow in particular, like thinking, I've thought through before the fact that Jesus experiences sorrow and grief, but he doesn't ever let it linger there. He keeps going. Yes. And I don't think I've really had a situation where I've mindfully put that concept into place until just recently. I got some news not that long ago about just timing-wise. I've talked about my fiance on the podcast before. We're long distance. He lives in England. And they're just timing-wise something kind of, I got news that it would take a little bit longer than I thought it would and be a little bit more expensive than I thought it would. And it just brought up all these questions. And so I let myself have a pity party for a couple days. And then I was like, okay, I've had my couple days to process. I need to wrap up the processing. And I decided to take it to my journal. And I was like, I'm sad, blah, 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 whatever. And then I just remembered sitting and being like, but wait. This just means the process of whatever God's will is. If God's will is in this happening, then he just gets to show off more to make it happen. Anyways, it's seeing Jesus fully experience his emotions helps me remember it's okay to have the little pity party. Yes. It's okay to feel the full weight of the sadness. You just got to keep going. Yes, and that's exactly what he's doing right there. Yeah. Okay, the next one up is compassion. This one is also coming from Luke 13, starting in verse 10. On Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. Just imagine. Oh, that sounds so painful. Mm-hmm. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. That's just so cool. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, we got this situation again. They got to chill out. The synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, get wrecked. But the people were delighted with the wonderful things he was doing. So I felt like that was just a great example of just the compassion for what she was actually experiencing, guiding his decisions. And it's, I don't know, he seems so caring in the way that he helps her and then immediately is like, yeah. Well, and 100%. And I think, he saw this person, he took compassion, he had compassion for her. And I think something else that jumps out to me whenever I hear you say that is just they were so who was it, a Pharisee that was there? Did it say?
It just says synagogue leader.
Oh, so this religious leader was so caught up in like all of these rules that they believed that the rest on the Sabbath and like what that meant, and like all of the little rules and regulations that they put, like what is work, what's not work. It blinded them to the fact that they saw a legit miracle happen right in front of their faces, and instead of being in awe of it, like because their own personal sensibilities were so like threatened, like they hatched plans and schemes to get rid of Jesus. Like, I mean, but just all of that blinded them to the fact that God incarnate was standing right there in front of them. They saw a legit miracle, and instead of being able to praise God because they saw it, they sought to squelch it out.
And also just like they forgot, in this is a great situation to me that feels like it shows clearly they forgot what the point was.
Yes.
The point wasn't following, now that Jesus is present and he's making a way for us in like as we speak in this scripture, the point isn't about following the law to a T, because that's impossible for us to do. It's about like we want to do what's right, but the point is that we want to love other people and show them that this is what God has done for me. Like, let me tell you about it. And they're just like, come tomorrow. Come back tomorrow for me to love you well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
No, and then I mean, but that one leads into this one because we've already seen Jesus express it in different ways. But like just frustration. Jesus felt frustration.
Yeah. He was going through it.
Yes. At slow learners and their lack of faith.
Totally not relatable.
So just the context for this passage. So he's gonna get frustrated at his disciples. So just to set it up. Like the disciples had already seen Jesus heal many people. Like they've seen him raise a girl from the dead and deliver people from demons.
Big news.
Like pretty awesome. They witnessed Jesus calming the storm, making wine from water, and miraculously multiplying food twice, and walk on water. Like they've seen all that.
No big deal.
Jesus had authorized the disciples to go and do the very same things they saw him doing, and going so far as in Matthew 10, 7 and 8, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out the demons. Like, so he's given them the power to do these things. Peter had just had the revelation that Jesus was the Messiah in front of all the disciples, and Jesus confirmed that this revelation was given to him by God. That's Matthew 16:6. And then Jesus, they saw him transfigured before Peter, James, and John, and God revealed Jesus in a visual display of his glory with an audible confirmation from God as to who Jesus was and how the disciples should relate to him with obedience.
What more do you need?
So, all of that had take place, and so that's the setup. So Jesus, Peter, James, John, and Jesus, they go up on the mountain. Jesus is transfigured. They see Moses, they see Elijah, they hear the audible voice of God, all of these things. And so while they're up on the mountain witnessing the transfiguration, a man had brought his epileptic son to the other disciples and asked them to heal him, but they couldn't. So the guys down at the bottom of the mountain, they didn't see the transfiguration, but they did see all the other things. So that's where we're going to pick up Matthew 17 and verse 14. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus. So when they came, that's Jesus, Peter, James, and John. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he said. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. Now, Jesus then, I love this. Jesus, now he's not being angry at the man. He's being angry at the disciples.
Yeah.
You unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied. How long shall I stay with you? How long should I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the body, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Then, then the disciples afterwards, they probably felt a little bit embarrassed because they just got publicly, chided.
Yeah.
Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "Because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have the faith as small as a mustard seed," which is extremely tiny, "you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." So, Jesus was frustrated with the disciples, like not the guy that brought the boy. Like sometimes I've heard it, I don't read it that way.
Yeah.
But even though he was frustrated with them, and he spoke pretty blunt to them, like, "You perverse generation, like, how long should I put up with you?" The purpose wasn't like to beat them down or keep them there. It was to spur them to greater faith. And, we do need people that have the ability to speak plainly to us and to help us grow as followers of Jesus. But whenever we are frustrated, and just like I'm going to keep reiterating this here because it really shows that we don't have to be in control of our emotions. Even though Jesus was frustrated, he didn't let it stop him from doing what he was called to do. He got frustrated with them. He corrected them. He still healed the boy.
Yeah.
He didn't then like shout at them and run them off. Like then whenever they came to him and said, "Hey, like, why couldn't we do this?" Like he told them how to actually do it. Like he didn't just leave them there.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I liked that one. I enjoyed that. So that's good. I feel like I need to take a few minutes to process it, but I'm going to I'll circle back later. I'm going to keep going. The next one up is agony, specifically at impending suffering. So I pulled two scriptures from here. They're both real short. The first one is Matthew 26, verse 39. This is right before this kind of the big part of the crucifixion story kicks off. So he is in the Garden of Gethsemane. His disciples are snoozing on the clock. Shame. And he's crying out to God, because he knows that he's about to be put through, like unspeakable torture. So it starts with, "And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, 'My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will.'" And I love that example in particular. If you read more into the particular situation of how he is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane and is asking for the cup to, like, when he says, "If it be possible, let this cup pass from me," he's talking specifically, hey, if there's another way, like, let me not have to go through this. But his attention is still on God, and his attention is still on, it's not about what I want, it's about what you want. It's about your ultimate plan. So this next scripture, it's coming from Hebrews 5, and it's kind of working off of some of those emotions, and this is written, later down the road, kind of looking backwards in time. So, Hebrews 5 verse 7, "In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him." So for me, like, this example reminds me of, if Jesus needed to go through it to become who he was supposed to be, I need to as well. Yes. Whatever it is, whatever the suffering is, it's there for a reason. But in the depths of that emotion, because that one's kind of hard to ignore. Yeah. Like you can only squash agony down, but for so long.
Yes.
But like in the moment, like still making sure to have your attention on God and on the fact that your will be done. Any time I like kind of take myself through that prayer, like that idea of praying, I don't want to go through this, but yes. I don't want this to happen. This isn't the reality that I'm hoping for. I always now, even when I pray for like simple things like, God, I'm really tired. I hope that I could just sleep heavy tonight, but your will be done. Like it's become such a second nature in my prayers and in the way that I talk to God, that it's like, I know that I have permission to ask for anything, but I also know that it's more about the shaping of me into wanting what he actually wants. And I don't feel like I was able to get there as quickly in my processing until I really incorporated, like, consistently reminding myself through prayer and meditation, like, it's not about me. It's not about what I want. There's an ultimate grander plan that is better. You know, it's better than I could have, ever dreamed of. However, the suffering is for a reason.
No, and I love that. And I think one of the things that's helped me remind myself, I mean, there's two types of suffering. Like, if you suffer because you're a knucklehead and you went out and you did something wrong, like, there's no glory in that.
Sometimes that do be me.
Yes. but if you suffer because of your faith, like, there is honor and glory.
Yeah.
For that. And, one of the things that I always come back to is, the servant is not above the master. If my master, who is Jesus, came here and suffered and had a rough go of it, but there were parts of his time where you can read where he had fun with his disciples, and there were respites of joy and pleasure and fun and all of those things. Like, who am I to think that I'm going to get something different?
Yeah.
It helped put my stuff in perspective. And I think I've mentioned before where Peter wrote where, there's all manners of Christians that are undergoing the same type of suffering that you are. That just puts it in perspective that at some point in time, like, now he's talking about Christian suffering because of your faith, but I think you can apply it more broadly, where whatever I'm going through right now, a follower of Jesus has gone through at some other point in time, at some place on this planet, and came out the other side of it okay.
Yep.
And that removes it from just being a problem that is unique to me.
Yeah.
Because there's no problem that I'm going to go through that is unique to just me specifically.
Yeah.
Somebody at some point in time on this earth has gone through something, the same thing that I'm going through. And just based on the odds of that and the numbers of people that have existed all over the planet, one of them had to have been a follower of Jesus that went through it and came out in a way that honored and glorified him.
Yeah.
And that's possible for me. So it helps me to put my junk in perspective when I think of it that way.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's good.
So I want to call an audible here. And so before I do that one, would you do forgiveness?
Absolutely. So this one in particular is Jesus is actively dying,
yes.
for lack of a better way to say it.
I think that's the only way.
Yeah, he's not good right now.
No.
Like, he is in. There's no world in which I can even fathom the amount of pain physically that he is in right now, and then is also knowing that he's about to die. So it's Luke 24:34. It's Jesus looks down from the cross and says, "Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do." And like,
wow,
that's hard. Like,
that's
that
wow.
He's praying that God would forgive the people who are torturing him. Like,
yeah.
Like, nobody's ever done that to me.
Yeah.
Anything that I've had to forgive people for, or pray that they would see that there's more for them, out of, there's something. I'm trying to think of a way to explain it without actually talking about a personal example, because that's if somebody hurts me and I want to forgive them, it's hard to do, but if Jesus did that on the cross, asking for the people who are actively crucifying him to be forgiven, and I'm supposed to be like Jesus, then I'm supposed to be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So this is actually when I came up with this one in particular, I found that scripture and was kind of thinking through it. I was like, how often do I pray that God would forgive them too? Like I pray, God help me forgive them.
Yeah.
But how often do
I'm feeling kind of convicted on there as you say it.
Yeah. Or like, would it help me to forgive? To like maybe he's praying that way for a reason, because there's some opportunity there to release hurt, and I don't know. I'm gonna have to give it a try, but I've never really thought through not just praying, God help me forgive, help me release, but also saying, God, I'm gonna advocate for this person that just hurt me.
Yeah.
Help them, forgive them. Like
no, I'm feeling convicted on that as well, because I've never done that. I've always prayed for, like, God help me to forgive this person, and I've prayed that prayer at certain circumstances in regarding things like multiple times. But I don't think I've ever said, God, please forgive that person. They didn't know what they were actually doing, or anything to that effect. I'm gonna have to do some journaling on that
one. There might be some hidden hurts there that I hadn't thought through, like, because that would really be the true sign of like release of control, to advocate for someone. Yes. Anyways, I'll stop ranting about it. But holy cow!
That's a big one. But so I want to wrap up with empathy on here. Hebrews 4:15 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." Like, we see Jesus be tempted through every single one of these types of emotions that we usually use to excuse for our poor behavior. Like, I was depressed, I was frustrated, I was angry, I was all of these things. I had, righteous anger or unrighteous anger, or all of these things that we use to rationalize or explain away our sinful behavior. But Jesus didn't. And because of who he is, he's able to empathize with us and our plights and stand as an advocate for us before God the Father, like we just saw him do. There. Like, so we don't have some far off, like, unrelatable God.
Nope.
Like, Jesus is able to come here and has experienced literally all of these things, yet did not sin. And because he did not sin, and he is our example, we do have that power through the Holy Spirit to own our emotions.
Yeah.
And not be a slave to them, and not let them lead us to act in a way that's dishonoring of our God and of our faith.
I do feel like I have grown enough in realizing that my emotions can't control my actions, to where now I can look back and see how I used to function, and how I function now, even though I'm probably like, if this represents the journey of not letting your emotions control you, I'm probably actually still right here. But like, there's so much freedom, even with like the little bit of progress that I've made of like not being trapped in these things that I struggle to put words to, and I just am learning to just let myself experience it, whatever it is, and then we just keep going, and we're not going to let it influence the actions that I do out of what I'm feeling. It's been a huge thing for me. So
and one of the things that's helped me to do that is learning how to pray the Psalms, because we see all of these emotions represented there, like the desire to forgive. We see anger manifest itself there, frustration, sorrow, sadness. There's a lot of sorrow and sadness. The desire for vengeance, and all of these things. And so one of the things that really helped me to learn how to verbalize my feelings is by doing that, because it helped open up my vocabulary.
Yeah.
In a way that allowed me to verbalize what I was thinking. Because if you don't have words or phrases to put to what you're feeling, for me anyway, they just stayed bottled up in there because I didn't have a way to vocalize them and put them out.
I would say I'm very similar in that way. Yeah, I'm tracking with you.
And so, like, for me, like, and just the act of, I go to my car a lot, and like I mentioned this last night in small group, sometimes whenever I'm feeling a certain sort of way, like I go out to my car and I audibly, like out loud, just pray whatever it is I'm feeling or I'm thinking or I'm experiencing or whatever it may be. And just by doing it out loud, it helps to get it out of me.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're called to cast our anxieties and things onto Jesus because he cares for us and he loves us. And so for me, just by doing that, I ask him to accept it as an act of obedience and faith and trust. Mm-hmm. Like, because I'm going to come here, I'm going to verbally diarrhea all of the things out and just get them out. And it helps me to acknowledge what it is I'm feeling. It helps me to own what it is. And sometimes if you're feeling a certain sort of way, like it's not maybe specifically the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but it's something that you'd already been sitting on and stewing on, like an orge situation.
Oh, yeah.
To where, like, you know, that's the root of what it is, and it's just manifesting itself by something else.
Yes, that is so true. I actually have like an exercise that I use for that.
Okay.
It's within the course that I've talked about a million times on this podcast, emotionally healthy spirituality, but they call it explore the iceberg. And it's like, here's this thing. Oh, it's big in my mind. Oh. And then it's like, there's certain questions that you can ask yourself. And I can't think of them off the top of my head, but it's just general, like the idea of journaling questions of like, let's get to the root of what's actually going on. And usually it's almost always like, I'll be very authentic here because I don't mind sharing it. Everything always typically boils down to like, I don't believe that I'm good enough. That's like the core like wounding that's just always there. So that's a great tool, and I feel like that combined with some of the scriptures that we've shared could be some good tools for our folks who are listening. So
absolutely, and you know, and just to kind of go with that a little bit further, we all have like a default thing that you just mentioned. Like whether it be like an insecurity thing or a fear thing. Yep. Like almost all of it has some sort of root in something like that. And once you acknowledge that, it's easier to recognize what it is. Like, okay, so why is this bugging me like this? Okay, and then you start working your way backwards. And mine is similar, like some sort of deep-rooted insecurity about all sorts of things. Or it's some sort of fear-based thing. You know, and so, but once you get to the root of what it is, like, and you finally see, like, this is how I'm broken in this way, then you can surrender that to God. And all of these other emotions and things that stem from it aren't as big and aren't as scary. And
it's such a huge relief.
And there's freedom in that. So we hope that this conversation was helpful for you. As always, like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, and we'll get you a mug. And we would love to just hear how our other conversations impact you. So feel free to just let us know, reach out to us, and we would just love to hear from you guys. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode of The After Chat.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for The After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.